Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Verdict. I am Spray and Pray 1000. Now in what's kind of a departure from what I usually do on The Verdict, these next two episodes, I'm going to do one now and then, once I'm done with this one I'll do another, are actually unuploaded versions. Now I am recording this in 2021. I was originally supposed to have verdicts on 3 different games done in 2 different episodes, the first of which is Spyro Reignited Trilogy and the second of which is Link's Awakening and Luigi's Mansion 3. And usually when I do a verdict, I have notes. I open up a notepad, I write down my thoughts and make some very simple bullet points, and usually that's what I use to base off my entire verdict. And what happened and what followed is I'm not really sure what happened to those verdicts. So these will probably be very short, very quick little episodes, just because I know that I, for some reason, never uploaded episodes 90 and 91 and then skipped right from 89, which was Assassin's Creed Odyssey, to 92, which I think is like Kingdom Hearts or something. So to start it off, what is Spyro Reignited Trilogy? Spyro Reignited Trilogy is a incredibly faithful remake of the first 3 Spyro games. The original 3 Spyro games were developed by Insomniac Games, who went on to make games like Ratchet and Clank and Infamous, and it's more, humble roots type of a deal. It's a very basic platformer. You play as Spyro the Dragon, whose basic abilities are to charge with his horns, to use fire, to fight enemies, and to breathe fire, and also glide, because you don't usually have a typical double jump. You rather glide your wings so you can move around areas. And it's a very simple, very standard platformer from the 90s. Now what the Reignited Trilogy does is it takes all of that, puts on a brand new coat of paint, and more or less homogenizes a lot of the mechanics that make the Spyro trilogy really good and memorable. So one of the biggest things I could say right off the bat is the gameplay, which is pretty much what most of this is going to be. The gameplay of every Spyro game is fairly simple. It's a collect-a-thon. You start out, your job is to collect a bunch of different gems, which are like your money collectible, and then usually like 1 or 2 other game-specific collectibles as well. In Spyro 1, you're freeing dragons and collecting eggs. In Spyro 2, you're collecting orbs for doing mini-games on the side, as well as talismans. And in Spyro 3, you're collecting eggs, which is like the primary thing that you're trying to get again. In each of these games, Spyro has different things that he can do. In the first game, it's pretty much limited to 3 kinds of stages. You have your overworld stages, your level stages, which are like typical levels, usually 3 per world if I'm not mistaken. And then lastly, you have actually there's 4 kinds of levels. There's overworld, there's typical levels, there's boss stages, which are just kind of a variation of normal level stages with more of an emphasis on fighting a boss, which is very simple. It's very fundamental. And lastly, you have the speedway stages, which are basically like tests of your ability to navigate an environment while collecting things and flaming down set targets back to back to get time extensions. It's it's your time attack mode. And for doing each one of these, you get like a dragon, or you get gems generally. And as usual, at the end of the game, you just get a 100%, and then you can go into the final area, which will boost you to 120. And it's a collect-a-thon through and through. You can't really fault it. It's not a type of game that really gets made too much anymore. But from the 90s, that was a very, very common thing. You have Crash, even Mario and Zelda were kind of collect-a-thons in their own ways. And Banjo-Kazooie and tons of other games existed like that. And for what it does, it's pretty alright. Spyro 2, on the other hand, is a bit more linear. Your whole goal of Spyro 2 is to collect enough talismans to defeat Ripto, and then at the end of it all, you collect enough orbs to get to Dragon Shores, where you get to play some cool mini-games and unlock a special reward, which is infinite flame power. Pretty simple, pretty much the same thing, just done in a different way. And Spyro 3 follows suit. You're collecting gems and eggs. This time around, however, Spyro is joined by up to 4, and as well as Sparks, who's a returning character. 4 new playable characters that you could play as. There's Sergeant Bird, the flying penguin. There's Agent 9, the monkey with the laser gun. There's Bentley the Yeti, and there's Sheila the kangaroo. As I said before, Sparks also is now playable in his own top-down shooter levels, which is kind of cool. They add variety to the game and everything. There's also new things to do, like skateboarding challenges, underwater challenges. There's a lot of breaking the mold that they do. Submarine shooters, tank levels and stuff, which was kind of explored a little bit in Spyro 2. In Spyro 2, they added more things that were upgrades to Spyro himself, like the ability to use head bash, to dive directly downward out of a jump. There's also climbing ladders, and as well as swimming. In Spyro 1, you can't swim. Upon touching water, Spyro will start to drown, and if you don't jump him out, or if he's out of life points, then you die. And I guess I should talk about life points. Sparks the Dragonfly doubles both as your health indicator, as well as as well as your ability to pick up gems. After 3 hits, he disappears and you're 1 hit away from death. As well as that, when he disappears, you can no longer rely on him to collect gems for you. Fairly simple stuff. And as you're kind of getting, the remake of this game pretty much takes that in spades. It basically takes all of that and plays it out in a very similar vein. So the same things that I would critique about Spyro 1, 2, and 3 are also present in the later games, with a few exceptions. The first of which was a feature that was exclusive to Spyro 1 in the original games and did not return in the later games where it would have been more useful, is the ability for Spyro to dodge roll. In the original Spyro 1, Spyro could dodge roll left and right by holding L1 and R1 to go left and right respectively. You could curve yourself around enemies, dodge some attacks. Now, Spyro 1 was a little bit claustrophobic in some places, so it's not a super helpful ability, but there's niche usages for it, and it's very helpful to have that sort of linear left and right movement where you can. Spyro 2 and 3, the original versions, did away with that. The Reignited Trilogy, however, brings it back because all 3 games are based off of the same engine. So it exists in one game. Why would they remove it? The only thing that does not follow suit from this is Spyro's ability to hover and to swim. Those do not come into Spyro 1, but they exist in Spyros 2 and 3 respectively. Additionally, what was originally a Spyro 2 edition, which was the ability for you to get a map on screen of each level, has been added into Spyro 1 and into Spyro 3. In the original versions of 1 and 3, you could not summon up a map. It just wasn't something that you could do. They also kept the gem seeking code. I think it's if you pull all bumpers and what was L1, R1, L2, R2. If you pull that, sparks. They actually moved it off of that onto click left stick, and I believe you could do it at any time, if I'm not mistaken, in Spyro 3. And Spyro 2 was more of a cheat. But, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it. Other than that, graphically and sound-wise, this game is a masterpiece. It is such a faithful rendition of the original games, to the point that as someone who is a nostalgic fan, having played through these games 3 times, once on the PS4, obviously, for the playthrough, which is after which where I wrote my couple of notes here, and again on Spyro for the Switch, and then again on the PC, and I'll do it again on the Series X because I like it. It is a very, very faithful game from top to bottom. As I said, the only real things that kind of get my goat a little bit are, for starters, in Spyro 1, doesn't really seem like they brought back the egg system. You're supposed to gain eggs in Spyro 1 by knocking out thieves who will drop them and you collect them. They only appear in the first 3 worlds, and then they proceed to not appear in the last 2 worlds at all. Now, again, this is just a critique of the game overall. It's not a critique necessarily of the Reignited Trilogy, but I'm just giving context as there's certain things about these games that are still limited. It's more or less almost a one-to-one. Additionally, in Spyro 2, there's no talismans that you get in the final world. Spyro 2 only has 3 worlds, and then Dragon Shores is like the finale, which isn't really a combat finale. It's more mini games because the whole theme of the game is going on vacation. And in Spyro 2, once you basically get to Winter Tundra, if you have enough gems and enough orbs, you could just go right to the final boss in the game. I always felt that it felt weird that not only is Winter Tundra like a very short world, if you really want it to be, because you don't even have to like run through the levels to get the bare minimum stuff. It also doesn't have enough to it, I feel. It definitely also feels like there was supposed to be a 4th world, although from what I remember that they said there wasn't. Spyro 2 is definitely the shortest out of all of them, especially when you consider you don't even need to really do the final world to get into the final boss. Now, the same can be said about the other two games. Spyro 3 especially, you could just get enough collectibles to go right to the final boss. But I feel like you have to do a little bit more work than you have to do for Spyro 2. Spyro 3 actually ends up, in my opinion, being one of the more balanced ones, or I guess out of these three, the most balanced one. So I don't really have a problem with it too much. I think it does what it needs to do. And I like these types of games. So like I said, this will be a fairly short rendition. Graphics are outstanding. It looks very, 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 very good. There's so much to really appreciate about it. All the little details, the character models and what they can do in the environment and stuff like that. Just looks really, really well done. What would I give Spyro Reignited Trilogy? Well, if you haven't picked it up, I recommend it. But I would give it a 92 out of 100. As I said, couple of critiques about how the games are sort of structured, both progression wise. There's not really too much to say about the story. It's a fairly simple 90s cartoon style story between Spyro and his friends. But other than that, I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think that there's a lot of potential here if they ever decide to make Spyro 4. Thank you for watching this episode of The Verdict. I will see you next time on the first ever double edition, delayed almost a year and a half. So stay tuned.